I'm Kristen and welcome back to my channel, and welcome for those of you who are new here. Today I'm going to be doing a list of some of the series that I started both last year and so far this year that I definitely probably won't be continuing. I'm going to go in the order of how likely I am to continue this series, starting from the maybes could be talked into it to the definitely nots. So the first series on this list is The Kingmaker Chronicles by Amanda Bouchette. The first book in this series is A Promise of Fire. This series is a maybe for me, and up until recently I probably would have said that I still planned to continue this series. There's just so many other books that I want to read. So I read the first book in this series earlier this year, and I did actually pick up the second book and start it, but I put it back down. It is a fantasy romance set in a Greek-inspired world. It essentially has all of the Greek gods in it with those names. And our main character, Kat, has a special power, or maybe a few, where she can tell if people are telling lies, and she is abducted and taken against her will by the second in command of the country that she's in order to work for the queen of this country. This is an interesting one because I actually really liked the plot and the world in this series, and if I continue and pick the second book back up again, it'll be because I want to find out what happens with this plot, with this world. The romance in this book really bothered me. I made a whole other video detailing the ins, the outs, the red flags, and all of the problems with this relationship, so you're welcome to check that out if you're interested. But essentially, I just don't think there was enough good things about this relationship to make me overlook all of the problems with it. Which is interesting because there's another series on this list that also has an abduction romance in it, and it's actually not the reason why I'm discontinuing that series. That relationship is also definitely problematic, but it's also very thought-provoking. Whereas in this series, I just don't know if I can get past the romance and the relationship in order to find out what happens. The next series is the Rhyme Chronicles, the first book of which is Onyx and Ivory by Mindy Arnett. This follows Kate, who used to be the daughter of the Master of Horse for the kingdom, until her father spontaneously tries to kill the king. This, of course, changes Kate's life drastically. Her father is killed, and she ends up working as a courier when she stumbles into one of the princes who she used to have quite the teenage fling with a few years later. She ends up saving the prince and his entourage and gets kind of sucked back into this world, which gives her the opportunity to attempt to investigate what it was that made her father suddenly attempt to kill the king all of those years ago. And while I did really enjoy the second chance at love romance subplot in this book, there was another storyline in the second half of the book that I just didn't really care about and got a lot of page time. I did start the second book at the time, but there is a pretty significant jump in time during which a lot of important stuff happens, and I really didn't like that. Although I just did recently find out that this is a duology, and that suddenly makes it so much more likely or feasible to pick up the next one. So I don't know, let me know if you have read this duology and if you think the next book is worth picking up. The next series is another duology, and that is the Bone Grace duology, the first book of which is Bonecryer's Moon by Catherine Purdy. This is a French-inspired young adult fantasy that follows a group of women or priestesses whose job it is to ferry the dead or their souls into the afterlife. But in order to get full access to the magic, in order to do this, they have to first lure, sleep with, and then kill their soulmate. This book follows 3 points of view, 2 of whom are acolytes or young women in this order who are about to become full priestesses. And then we also follow a young man whose father was killed by one of these women, not the 2 in the book, but like someone in this order, when he was really young and he's out for vengeance. There were some really cool elements to this magic system. Basically, before they can get to the point of luring and killing their soulmate, they have to first hunt 3 different creatures. They have to carve an item of jewelry out of one of those bones in order to acquire some of the either physical or mental characteristics or traits of that animal. For example, night vision or superior strength or agility. What didn't work for me in this book was the attempted enemies to lovers romance subplot. I just didn't feel like there was actually enough there for it to work for me or to be feasible. There were also a lot of different action scenes that I actually really struggled to follow, and that could have been because I was listening to the audio version, which I also had problems with, but for other reasons. And this is another duology, so again, it wouldn't be that difficult to complete this series. The second book, Bone Crier's Dawn, did come out earlier this year. So let me know if you've read it. The first book ended with a little bit of a twist that was actually kind of surprising and potentially intriguing. So if you think that that element to it makes it worth picking up the next book, or if you think that that is like really, really well done in the next book, definitely let me know. But again, it's just not really a priority, and I don't feel any urge or desire to find out really what happens in this series. The next series is the Bargainer series by Laura Thalassa, and the first book in the series is Rhapsodic. This is a fantasy romance story following a siren called Callie and the bargainer, Des. When Callie is 16, she racks up a lot of favors or like magical debts with the Fae King Desmond, who is the bargainer. For some reason, he never calls to collect on that debt until now. So this is told in a back and forth timeline where we're getting the now timeline when Des comes to collect on his debt or his favors to Callie. And we also get the then timeline from 7 years ago when Callie first met the bargainer, and we see how she acquired all of this magical favor debt and how they got to know each other. There is a bit of a magical mystery component to this book as well that has to do with something going on in the Fae otherworld. It was fine. I actually read the first 2 books and the male perspective novella. I thought the romance was actually really good, if a little bit reminiscent of a certain relationship in a certain Sarah J. Maas series. I just kind of thought that the plot let me down, and at this point in the series there aren't really any question marks left regarding the relationship, and I just don't really care what happens with the plot. Okay, the next series is the All Souls trilogy. The first book in this series is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is an urban paranormal fantasy following a witch, Diana, and a vampire, I think his name was Matthew. This has of course been turned into a television series as well. I read the first book last year sometime, and I don't even know really what to say about this series. I actually don't even think I can describe it without taking up a ton of time because it was just like kind of wild. So I will try.
Essentially, Diana is a witch, but she doesn't really want to use her magical powers because her parents were killed for being witches. And she is a scholar. She's a visiting scholar at Oxford, where she one day accidentally calls up this really coveted and important book to these sort of paranormal species within our world. And she does so accidentally. It's not a book that can be intentionally called up, or at least it's sort of been like hidden and protected, and no one has been able to call it up until Diana does accidentally. In our world, or in this world in the book, there are witches and demons and vampires, but they are sort of all hidden. They aren't even allowed to commingle amongst the various groups in order to not draw attention to their otherness. This book that she draws up one day and returns puts a lot of attention on her from these other species. Matthew, the vampire, for some reason starts feeling really protective of her. He's also a scholar or a researcher at Oxford as well. He sort of starts protecting her from this increased attention from all the other witches and vampires and demons.
I really liked the first part of the book where they were like at Oxford, and there was this she's kind of terrified of this extremely old vampire and very powerful vampire, but it was like a will they won't they sort of tension. They go to a yoga class together one time, and there was like a little bit of a mystery with this book, but I thought it was going to be like that for the whole book, and it kind of goes off the rails for me in like the latter half of it, and I kept being shocked at everything that was happening, and not in a good shocked way, and just like a where's this going sort of way. I felt shocked when I finished this book, and I don't really have any intention of picking up the next book. If anything, I'll watch the TV series because I love the actor that plays the male love interest. I forget his name. This guy. Okay, the next series is another fantasy romance, also by Laura Thalassa, so the same author of the Bargainer series, and that is the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse series, the first book of which is Pestilence. This is a dark, urban / apocalyptic romance, because who knew that was a thing? I feel like everything that I'm about to say could be followed with a look from you, so by all means, but hear me out. I read the first book about Pestilence. It follows the main character, Sarah, comes across Pestilence as he is spreading plague across North America, and she tries to kill him. Turns out, Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse can't be killed, and he takes her captive. So yes, this is that other abduction romance series that I was talking about. But again, hear me out. It was actually kind of interesting and a decent romance, to be honest, even though I feel like a hypocrite for saying that about an abduction romance. But what this book is really about is humanity and mercy. It is through her that he begins to really see and understand the good in humanity. This is a romance, so of course at some point they fall in love. And Pestilence, yes, that is the only name that we get for him. But Pestilence, anyway, is almost the perfect male lead. Minus the abduction, captivity, and plague aspects. But because he is so honest and forthright. He also has no other experiences with humans outside of other people like Sarah who have been trying to kill him. So he says what he feels and what he means and what he's thinking about their relationship as it's happening. There's no game playing, there's no lying, there's no manipulation, there's no fear of intimacy. He is in complete awe and wonderment of his experiences with Sarah and with the concept of love. And so I really, really appreciated what this book explored about humanity through the relationship between Pestilence and Sarah. But one was enough. I don't really feel the urge to read 3 other books about apocalyptic horsemen. That was good. One was enough. So I have absolutely no plans to continue this series. So the next and last series on this list is one that I originally had down as like a maybe, probably won't, but perhaps. And then some stuff happened and now it is a definitely not, will never continue this series. And that is the Something Dark and Holy series by Emily Duncan, the first book of which is Wicked Saints. This is a Russian-inspired young adult dark fantasy about a faith-based conflict between 2 countries, one of which has or believes in a pantheon of gods who can give God granted powers to humans, and one of these people we do follow. And then the other country has abandoned that faith and is into this blood magic and bloodletting. And so we follow 2 blood mages as well. I feel like the first book was sort of what I was looking for at the time that I read that first book. It has a kind of dark, complicated enemies to lovers romance where it's they still sort of really hate the idea of the other one, and there's really uncomfortable hate, sexual tension, energy. The first book was pretty graphic, not in intimacy scenes, more with the bloodletting and violence and some stuff like that. And then the second book was just beyond excessively grotesque, unnecessarily, disturbingly graphic and grotesque. We're talking, one of the characters' eyes are literally oozing blood throughout the entire book. Another character has extra eyes just popping out of his skin all over the place. And honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I finished that one and did feel kind of like she had lost me a little bit on it. And then earlier this year, there was some stuff that came out about the author. And while I'm not necessarily one to not read a book just because of author personal stuff, this one really lost me. And I have absolutely no interest or intention of continuing this series or continuing to support the author. I won't get into the details here, but I will link Jess Owen's community video where she talks about what happened with that author down below, if you're interested. Anyway, those are all of the series up to date that I have started and probably definitely won't continue. If there are any here towards the beginning of the list that you think I really, really should pick up and give them another go, let me know. I'm definitely open. And if there is a series that you have started that you're just not into that is also here, or another series that I've mentioned before, let me know. I'd be really interested to hear that as well. Anyway, I will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye, guys.